So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Stefan Graber, the Director General of Fiata, and I will be your moderator for this panel discussion, this high-level dialogue on digitalization. And I wish a warm welcome to everybody that is joining us. So I see some of you are still ongoing, registering to this high-level dialogue. So I will just maybe start, and so that we will be on time. There is a lot of discussion that we are really eager to start on these very important topics. So yes, more than ever, digitalization is at the heart of all concerns of the freight forwarder community. As a proof, this panel of the Fiata Week is currently the most popular of the whole week, with more than 180 registered participants. It proves that Fiata members have been eagerly waiting for a Fiata solution, which should help them to interact in a secured way with their different stakeholders while keeping control of their data. This came to a reality last spring with the launch of the new Fiata digital strategy, which foresees the implementation of 6 projects, which comprises the elaboration of a digital identity for Fiata members, the digitization of standards documents, the certification of documents and electronic signature, the creation of a professional network, the facilitation of data exchange through interoperability, and finally, business intelligence. So 9 months later, Fiata has launched its first proof of concept, which will test its EFBL standards and document tracking solution. So for the one who are interested to know more about the different projects, you will find a dedicated page on Fiata website, and I invite you to visit it. There are a lot of content there, also some short animation video to help you to navigate in this very important strategic and hot topic for Fiata. We thought that it is the right time to look at the accomplishment and the next step to move forwards a digital supply chain. So before I turn to the panel we have today to discuss this topic, I just would like you to note that you have the possibility to ask questions to the panelists. You have a Q&A session where you can ask your question, and I will turn a little bit later to Miss Lucelia Tinenbart, our Fiata Digital Project Officer, to take up the questions that you might have. It might be difficult to address all your questions, so we will try to see which one are the most burning one or come the more frequently to exchange them with our panelists. So let me turn now to our panelists of today. I'm very proud to introduce our top expert who have agreed to share their expertise with Fiata members today. So I will briefly introduce them, but I remind you that you can find a more detailed bio in the Fiata brochure. But I will start with Stefan Null, Head of Digital Engagement and Transformation at CHAMP, who brings with him 30 years of experience in the air cargo and logistic industry. Since the beginning of the Fiata journey on its new digital strategy, Stefan showed enthusiasm about it, and the CHAMP participated in the Digital Identity Working Group after we had initial contact last summer. So welcome, Stefan, and I'm really happy to continue the discussion with you and Fiata. Steve Walker, Logistic Business Consultant and Advisor. I think I have no need to present Steve, who is a forwarding consultant with 45 years of successful industry experience. He's well known from all our freight forwarder members. I think his career is inspiring for lots of them. So he initially expressed his doubts about Fiata's ability to pave the way for the industry in the digital age, but then welcomed the new direction of Fiata in 2020 with its digital strategy. So he also recently founded SWG Global, helping freight forwarder to look into the future. So I think it would be very interesting to hear from Steve how he sees the future of freight forwarding and the challenges Fiata is having to take up in the months to come. And finally, our third panelist, Henk, is a renowned specialist of digitalization in air transport, responsible for the development of standards to support digitization of air cargo at Fiata. He initiated IATA 1 record. He's regularly invited as an expert to speak in international working groups. And we recently both participated in an ICAO meeting on collaboration with UNEC, where the work of Fiata on digitization was presented. And Henk raised an interesting point of view during this discussion about that interoperability doesn't necessarily mean that all modes of transport should align to one unique standard. So we might come back to this point later on in the discussion. I think it's also a very important aspect, that is interoperability for the future with the development of all the digitization projects in the supply chain environment. So for more details, as I said, on the profile of our speaker, I invite you to consult the Fiata Week brochure. So now let's start, and let's start maybe with a general question to our panelists. I would like to hear your feeling about the current state of digitalization in freight forwarding and the main challenges ahead. And maybe we can ask to Steve, who was very vocal on this in the last few years and was calling for freight forwarders to wake up and for Fiata to wake up. What is your view today? Where do we stand?
Well, thank you, Stefan. I would like to start with by saying that, being a freight forwarder, I must start by telling you that I take your 45 years, you say I've been in forwarding, and I make them immediately 48 years in forwarding. And I think during this time, the key strength of forwarders' DNA has been isolated independence. The last 15 months has shown us this DNA is becoming now our greatest weakness. Our personal buying habits have radically changed during the pandemic. The attack on our retail customers is not coming from competitors or carriers, it is now coming from consumers who seek a home shopping experience and so quickly have forgotten their brand loyalty. Before the pandemic, an e-commerce retail forwarder was considered a future-proofed model. Now they are in direct line of fire from the ever-expanding Amazon. I was hoping the Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren's call for Uber companies to be broken up would gather pace. We should challenge so much individual data being held by one company, and yet our businesses also support the AWS cloud. We're being surrounded by cheap offerings to be enticed now, possibly to repent in our leisure. Should we not spread our risk? There is a need for Fiata to partake in global lobbying to protect our sector. Look what the Road Haulage Association in the UK does for its members. It has its own CEO of social media leading the debate with and on behalf of members. In my time, steamship lines carved up the market in cartels, referred to as conferences, and they were made illegal. Yet their blockchain initiatives, which I called out publicly as a data cartel, prompted them to seek FMC approval for software offerings, the first that I know of, which was agreed before Christmas 2019. This ensured they could meet to discuss their data product with fellow and slot charter carriers. And I guess the operational incentive for what we hear of space inducements to encourage more BCOs to sign up, all without fear of collusion. I now put in a full stop, I hit return and a new paragraph. What turmoil we have experienced in 2020, Longer close-off days, record freight rates, space and container shortages, new port revenue streams, slower steaming, disruption on trade lanes, threats to serve UK ports only by feeder vessels. Thank goodness there has been no collusion. So tell me how the DNA of Fiata has changed. It used to be an old boys club with respected members hanging on to prestigious board roles. If you have the same now, there needs to be encouragement to give up these roles in favour of respective positions of advice at this conference. We need younger leaders. Not that my friend Jens Roma is young, but his knowledge, his free contribution, and that of his Ocean Committee, like many others, really impressed me when I met them. Maybe Fiata could take part of the contributing member salary costs, because you need current knowledge to brainstorm the next steps. Historical knowledge is not enough. We need Fiata to seek the same steamship line meeting arrangements, leading to forums with the top forwarders. We need e-forwarders on board and software offerings that could receive Fiata accreditation, to meet online, to determine the future protocols of our industry. Do we collaborate with the IATA and others with common digital drive? So forwarders no longer all seek the same and pay individually for the next data feeds. Therefore, Fiata needs to own internal knowledge to create new revenue streams. Country associations need a driving international Fiata. I would ask each country membership should extend their levels to a platinum one that automatically gives Fiata membership corporately and individually to the company's CEO. I suggest free membership to any C executive woman that wants to join. Fiata needs direct access. We need to strip out layers that delay knowledge transfer, delay our responses, and delay our actions. Because the real race in this is to the customer's boardroom table. Our traditional 3PL offerings are no longer about trade lanes or modes of transport. It's about data delivery. We need to become 4PLs. We need to control all the data feeds for our customers, thus nullifying the one-dimensional steamship line offerings. We need no more data holes. We need to deliver a monthly pack to each board member relevant to their responsibility with meaningful C-exec KPIs to create their internal debate on what is their 2-4% logistics cost to serve. Every Fiata meeting should have a wild idea thrown into the mix. Mine is that the steamship lines can apparently pay for super vessels after 3 sailings at the present rates. Could a forum of forwarders decide to lease their own vessels or slot charter space into Europe or the US in debate with and through Fiata? Why do we want to spend the next decade supporting a hostile supplier who is trying, if not to take our freight directly, they have a longer term goal of gaining our data and then making us pay for it? There are enough investors looking for fast returns. This idea is worth a consideration. My further comments support Stefan and Henk's lead questions. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you, Steve. So, yeah, what an amazing program. You drafted the Fiata program for the next decade. I think it's a very rich answer you gave to us, mentioning major change in environment, new reality, necessity to adapt, new knowledge requested, new also blood, new energy. And moving, and a real cultural change from moving from a certain isolation to dynamic collaboration. So let me turn now to Stefan. So in air cargo, did you have same challenges before going digital? And how do you think, in light of the introduction of Steve, what do you think we can learn from your experience in that you went through in the last few years?
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you, Steve, for this impressive introduction. Actually, what we have done in air cargo, we have started almost 10 years ago with the stimulus of IATA around the ERA bill, and this was the first real step around the digitalization of a physical document, which was the ERA bill. Previous that, we had already exchanged the rates, we were exchanging some information, but the real big benefit and big challenge I see for the coming years is really the change of processes. Until now, what is important for the digitalization is not to keep the same processes. What makes digitalization interesting is that you can re-engineer your process and gain value so that you can do what your competitor or what the Amazons of these days are doing. They are really focusing on the experience. What is the user experience and how you can make this user experience really smooth. At the same time, I'm looking at what Fiata is doing, and it's the right time now for you, Fiata, because we were missing a little bit your support there. If I look at other industries like the banking industry, where you have Swift, for example, that has enabled the transformation on the way they are exchanging messaging, and the fact that the Swift message has come with a clear standards and business rules around these standards, that now you can do a transfer immediately on any point of the world. Same for the automotive industry, which is quite interesting. The automotive industry is also using a very old standard called EDIFACT. And now if you are a mirror manufacturer, you want to produce mirror for the car industry, you have to follow a certain protocol, certain rules, so that you can easily join the environment. So what really I see for the freight forwarder is to make use, start today, of the affordable technology. It's available now. Before it used to be very expensive, now it's very cheap if you want to try and focus on what the digitalization will mean to you, how you can improve your processes. Airlines are doing a great job, and you see more and more airlines now doing booking in seconds. When I remember when I started my career almost 30 years ago, when I was working for a freight forwarder, Metrans in Lyon, you had to wait hours before you can make a booking. Nowadays, it's instant. You have access to capacity, you have access to price in a matter of seconds, and this is exactly what helped the business to gain efficiency. Freight forwarder, I like to call you architect. You are the architect of trade, and now you have to really make sure that you are using the right tools to make sure you can deliver value much quicker.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. So I retain from what you said that effectively technology today is more accessible, but it's really about re-engineering the customer experience and using now this possibility offered by technology to create value in a certain way in the supply chain. Henk, on your side, in retrospect, what is your view on this?
So, firstly, as you know, I work for IATA, the International Air Transport Association, but my position is not just for airlines, it's not even just for air transport. It's really something that goes across the modes, and it's end-to-end, you know, whether that means shipper to consignee or manufacturer to consumer, as Steve pointed out. And in all of this, it's my firm belief that the freight forwarders are central. They're a central player in this. Perhaps in terms of perspective, what I'd like to give you is, what is the challenge we're up against in terms of where this is going? We've heard some of the practical challenges we have today, but where are we going to end up? One of the things that happened, of course, is the general digitalization of society. The fact that we're having this meeting here with live video streams, with chats on the side, with Q&A, everything that we hear is tremendous progress compared to only just a few years ago. The fact that we can do this is a strong indication where society is in terms of digitalization. I don't have to tell you that when you look at freight, there's still plenty of warehouses with clipboards and pencils and paper, okay? So there's a bit of a difference there that we need to keep in mind. There's a big gap to bridge still. Secondly, until COVID, I think e-commerce was one of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we have been looking at. One of the things perhaps to point out is that e-commerce itself is digital by birth. All e-commerce was born with digital technologies and nothing else. And so if you look at some of these companies, of course, the well-known ones like Alibaba and Amazon, as many of you have done, you'll understand what their logistics network looked like, and it is fully digitalized. These e-commerce companies cannot operate unless the entire supply chain is digitalized. They can't deliver that 24 or 48-hour delivery timelines if they weren't. What that means for anybody that wants to be part of that is that you need to have that same level of digitalization, which certainly isn't the case today. And I think that's one of the challenges, is that it's not going to go away. The last thing we want, and I think Steve already indicated that, is we don't want the world to be run by Amazon. That is not where we fit. None of us fit there, whether it's airlines or forwarders. So in order to be part of it, we need to play their game, and we need to play it just as well, if not better. And then all of that was put in challenge by COVID-19 last year. If we see how rapidly the business environment had changed across the modes, right? Across the various modes, how quickly the business models had to be adapted to that crisis, how airlines were putting freight into their passenger cabins, something that was never been thought about before, couldn't be done. The fact that contracts with perhaps forward-looking contracts had to be canceled because of lack of capacity, and the fact that everybody had to adapt. That agile environment screams digitalization. You cannot do these things unless you have access to information, unless you have the ability to negotiate rapidly and put things in place. And so if you extrapolate this, perhaps 5 to 10 years from now, it is my expectation, and it's not just my expectation, but in the people I've met with, is that we can almost be sure that all of us will be completely digitalized in 5 to 10 years from now. Because if we're not, we may not be doing this job in 5 to 10 years from now. And I think that's almost an existential challenge to us, is that we must do this. It's not a nice thing to have to believe or say, but that's what I believe is a fact. So digitalization is not a nice to have anymore. It's an absolute urgency.
Thank you. And I see that Steve is moving the head in approbation. So I think it's very close with also what you think.
It certainly is. I think forwarders have to move forward. I mean, and I cite an example, 2021. We have been through tremendous rate increases, and I wouldn't like to put a percentage on it, but what percentage of invoices that go out for forwarders are compliant? Without wanting to offer, and I would say would be difficult with so much rate fluctuation, and it is sent into our customers. And if we don't know how they're made up, the customer is then paying people to pass those invoices, which to me seems absurd. We should surely be reaching some situation of a different way of billing, maybe open book, maybe to ensure the invoices move swiftly through to the general ledger of our customers and we get paid quicker, as an example. Okay, and that offers what I would classify as a soft saving for the importer, maybe, that they're not paying people to pass invoices on all modes of transport. They are guaranteed that the invoices that are being passed are correct, or the systems are rejecting them. Now that is hard for forwarders to come to terms with, but I think it's something that we have to consider and make greater contribution to our customers' operation through systems.
So, Stefan, on your side, what other contribution do you think, how we can improve also the services and the performance of the services through digitization?
I think the distribution side is very important. Nowadays, we are mentioning about all those cargo in cabin, all those freighters that are being run. All those operations are done really, I would say, today over the phone still. But you have a lot of paperwork that always are produced around these, and Steve mentioned it just on the invoicing side. But I think what is very important is the distribution aspect, how you make visibility, increase the visibility in terms of offering. Nowadays, what I see freight forwarder becoming shipping lines, becoming airlines, and also becoming broker for other freight forwarders. I mean, in Paris, you have big freight forwarders that are also selling capacity to other freight forwarders. But the common point of all this is that as soon as you are on the digital path, meaning that you can start to book online, you can trade online, then it becomes much more efficient, much more quicker. So one key aspect on the distribution side, for example, is the visibility. Start to really re-engineer. I mean, you had during this COVID time, it was also a great time for new startup to come on. You have new freight forwarders that are on the place that are purely digital. No more emails. You know, we are very attached to email because from email, it's, you know, you keep the same paper process. I used to send you a letter. Nowadays, it's not any more emails. You have to log in, and you have shippers that are also booking directly, so through web platform. So I think it's moving very quick. And I think the key of this is really we need to have people participating. We have to make sure that everybody is aware of it. What you have done on the digital ID side is really critical, because having a digital ID is the first step. As Champ, we have our own IDs, but it's important also to have to gain speed in the way we distribute IDs and we work with IDs. So the digital aspect, and that's why you mentioned it on the work done by Lucelia on the digital side, digital ID side. It's really the basis, and I encourage every participant, every association to be part of those projects, because this is the basic. Sending messages is really easy because you have technology, but now sending it to the right people, identifying the right audience, that's most important.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can turn to Lucelia to see if we are inspiring our more than 80 participants today.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Stefan. So yes, we have already quite a few questions. Our panelists seems to be very inspiring for our audience. So one of the hot topic is data ownership. So the first question is, how can we facilitate data sharing while ensuring each data owner remains in control of their own data? And the second question is more related to adoption of digitalization. So what should a small company focus on if they have a small budget but still would like to benefit from advantages that digitalization can bring? So what are the first steps that they should take to be future-proof?
Good. So I don't know who wants to start. Maybe we can start with data ownership. And I think when we talk about data, we can also talk at one point in time about interconnectivity, that interoperability Inc.
Yes, so data ownership, when you look at the way that systems are sharing data these days, one of the concepts that is fundamental to this working is something we refer to as data sovereignty, meaning that whoever owns the data is fully in control and makes all the decisions about who can use it and for what purpose. This only works if it's backed up by technology. We can, of course, write contracts that say that if I send data to you, you can do this or you can do that, but I have no guarantee you're going to respect that contract. So technologies like data sharing means that if you keep the data yourself, then you decide who can access it. It may be on the internet, but if someone that shouldn't get the data accesses it, you can refuse their access. And so it's a combination of things. One is that concept of data sovereignty. In other words, you're in charge. And secondly is something we refer to as data at source. In other words, the originator of the data hosts the data, or is in control at least of that data. So I think that addresses that question. However, this is completely different from what we do today. Today, all our business processes are based on sequential processes. The whole concept of messaging is that I send data to someone who sends it to another party, who sends it on to another party. And there's two problems with that. One is that as they copy the data, they may make mistakes in the copying. For example, one system is not compatible with the other and you lose some data or you add some data. And secondly, you lose that control, which was the very question here, is that when a third party gets your data, they may not even know whether they're allowed to use it or not. And they may use it for the wrong purpose. So there has to be, on one hand, that conceptual shift of I am in control of my data. And secondly, the technologies that we adopt must be adapted to that. I don't know if you would like me to address the interoperability question now, or...
I think Steve raised their hand. So
okay, go ahead, Steve.
To interoperability.
Thank you. I would like to put this in a basic freight forwarding context. When I had my own business, we created probably one of the first dashboard software, and we had a great deal of difficulty dealing with interfaces, etc. And I went to see our Chinese agent, and they said, Steve, the interfaces are causing us major problems. why don't you just use our software? Now, this was business that was moving from the Far East to our UK and our USA offices. One simple question brought a smile to his face. And the question was, if we use your software, who will own our freight paying customers that were, it was my customers, you know, my as in the business customers. And he smiled. And I said, no, thank you for your opportunity. We want to move it onto our own platform. That is always the race for a forwarder. You have to control your own. And that's why I became so animated about blockchain and the steamship I wanted to complete to own our data and then charge it for us. And I think I always look at things with that comment in mind. Do we own the data? And if we don't, we have to invest more to make sure that we remain in control.
Interesting. Stefan?
Yes, I just want to go back also on the messaging. So we have data on one side, message on the other side. I mean, I think what Hank is describing is super important. And I think the data ownership is really the critical issue. But at the same time, the world still today, you need to get cargo moving. And you have to deal with messaging. And messaging is really the start, but it shouldn't be the end of the journey. So messaging, I encourage many forwarders to get control already of your messages. We are at Champ, we are exchanging around 180 million messages per year between forwarders and airlines. And there are many of those messages that are wrong just because some systems are not compatible with others, or just because the processes are not leveraged. What we try to do in our community, we try to really educate our community on the typology of errors, for example. One typical error that we observe is a message sent too late. So in other words, that you are sending the electronic message once you have already delivered the goods at the airport, so which is creating a lot of issues for the groundler, for the airline, even for customs in some scenarios. So I think it's really an opportunity, and you have to also be pragmatic. At the end of the day, what shall I do now? And this is linked to the next question that was asked to Lucelia. And being pragmatic, start with your message, follow what is being worked on the data side, and the one order, I think by IATA, it's a fantastic program also, which has some paths with Fiata digital roadmap. You have already the fundamentals there, but my message again, go back, think about the message, try to do it, and look at it. Look at what type of data you are sending in your digital messages.
Thank you. So it's interesting. So I will go back now to Hank for the second part, interoperability. Then we will move to the other question. But I think we understand that once we talk about having control of the data, we need to exchange somewhere the data. And so very quickly, we end up to the question of interoperability. That seems to be really the new holy grail to achieve. So what do you think this will be necessarily to a certain degrees of standardization, what we had the opportunity already to touch, and what are the pitfalls here when we talk about interoperability, standardization, ownership of data, to help the people that are with us today to understand what is behind this?
So for many years, really until now, the focus in exchanging data has always been on complying with standards, right? Compliance. IATA has standards, UNCFACT has standards, the World Customs Organization has standards, lots of standards everywhere. And there has been this sort of it's a form of cooperation and fighting between these organizations in trying to see who has the better standard and which one do we comply with. The technology today has advanced in such a way that this is no longer necessary. We don't have to comply with every standard. And the sort of technologies that Stefan, for example, his company operates, actually allow you to connect with many different systems without necessarily being compliant with the standards. And so the discussion that we need to have and are having has to shift from what standard do we use and how we do comply with it. The question has to be, how can we operate with a third party? It's a nuance that is different, but the question is important because we can stop fighting about or making strategic choices about standards. More about, okay, fine, you use this standard, I use this one. How can we interoperate? Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you're going to be exchanging every single piece of data that is in one standard or another, but only the data that you need. So if you want to make a booking, all that matters is that you are capable of accessing booking data and quotes and things like that. It doesn't mean you need everything else. So to move towards interoperability is an important mindset shift. And the reason why this is critical is that as we are building these digital networks, more and more will be exposed in connecting our systems with third parties, with other systems. The more systems there are, the more that connection becomes a challenge. And so we have to be very pragmatic. Interoperability is a very pragmatic approach versus compliance, which is very, very hard. And so let's not do the hard stuff. These organizations can still fight about it and work together. That's okay. But we need to worry about, can I operate with you? And if so, what do I need to do? If I do that, I have a far bigger network of partners than if I stick to single standards. And so that's sort of the message there.
Oh, thank you. That was very comprehensive, I guess, for everyone. Does someone wants to add something on this part before we move to the other question?
No, I think, and as mentioned by Hank, it's also an opportunity for you to re-engineer your process, because it gives you really the fundamental is about yourself. When you deal with a client, how do you receive the data from your client? And I think going digital is really to rethink, okay, how do I am interacting with my customer? Dear shipper, most of the shippers, okay, the big ones, they have their own ERP systems, but there are still many, many small shippers out there that are also lacking behind in terms of technology. But it's also this opportunity you can give to a shipper. And when I see new freight forwarders coming on the block and asking shippers, don't send me any emails, just log in, put your data in there, log the stuff, send me your invoice, a scan copy, for example, I will read it, no worries. I think this is really essential to start. And this will, and here you don't care about the transport mode at this stage.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go back now to Steve with the other question of Lucelia on the adoption of digitization. So I know, Stefan, you mentioned before the cost, but if we look, Steve, with your vast experience in leading logistic company, how do you think the small and medium companies will embrace digitization, and how can Fiata make sure to unite the whole spectrum of freight forwarding companies in a digital approach that we just discussed now, considering the diversity of the freight forwarding spectrum or community?
Well, I think that Fiata has a role to play for this. I think people, when they first start businesses and they start expanding their networks, their IT networks, I think they would like to, I'd like to feel they would gravitate towards Fiata for some leadership. For what you have created within your ecosystem to begin with, I think is commendable. I think everybody appreciates that the next decisions you make kind of outside this could be tremendous, but could also be catastrophic if you go in the wrong direction. So I think the forwarders look for some leadership. Don't necessarily, the larger ones are probably more pragmatic, but slightly off center from this question. I would pay tribute to Bob Keane of BIFA and his initiative to engage with younger forwarders. I mean, he and Carl Hobbes gave me the opportunity to speak with young forwarders that coming into the industry and were expecting answers from us. They couldn't imagine doing so many of the manual jobs. I mean, I could talk to them about the telex machine, bander machines, typewriters, carbon paper. I mean, that's historical for them. They wanted to imagine that the systems would work. How does it all work? How does the communication all work? And I do believe that Fiata has a role in that. I think bringing on board maybe some of the major TMS players to try and see what their hot points are, what help they need to expand their services. So I don't turn the question onto Fiata, but I do hope that Fiata have a role to play here.
Thank you, Steve. I think we have 4 minutes left, so maybe let's turn to Lucelia to take a last question from our audience, and then I will just go through each of you to see if you want to add a concluding word to this discussion. Lucelia?
So another topic that seems to be of interest to our audience is online and digital freight forwarders. So what do you think about them? Do you think they are the future of our industry, or do you see them more as a threat?
Wow. Who wants to try?
I give a try. I think they should not be seen as a threat. They should inspire you to change. And when you see those new freight forwarders, I mean, there was an example in France where you have this company OC that has been bought by Bolloré to also help them to address a certain part of the business, because you still have some shippers that are attached to their whole standard process and that want to keep doing the same thing that they were doing. But at the same time, you have new shippers coming in that are also willing more intuitive way of working, and I think this is what those new freight forwarders are bringing to the market. And they of course there might be a threat. I'm not too sure. Will depend on the relationship you have with your shipper and your ability to also provide the full logistic service, which is not easy. We didn't discuss about it, but we are in a complex world. We are in a very regulated environment. We haven't touched this part as well. So with this, you need a lot of expertise, but I think they should inspire people to really rethink your own processes and how I can add value there. Maybe Steve, you...
Sorry.
Go ahead, Steve, I wanted to ask you.
No. I get very annoyed when I hear the word disruptors. I went head to head with discussions with Flexport. I got close to them. I saw their software. I thought it was amazing. It came at a completely different direction. It would have been interesting for some of the other major TMS programs to see it. I mean, you have to say at the same time, they're opening offices all over the world, and good luck to them. I don't know any other industry that's raised as much money as they have. They certainly have old-fashioned freight forwarders within their business. I think they have a commendable model, but I think they should be accepted. And I'd like to see Fiata having a division for these type of companies. I think they exude confidence. They look at it in a different way, but they are still moving freight. But it's about the information they give at the back end that attracts the customer.
Thank you. Hank, you want to add something on that?
Yes, an interesting thing perhaps about, you gave the example of Flexport, is that they started off as a fully digital forwarder. And little by little, they're getting more and more into the hardware stuff, warehousing and things like that. So it's not a black and white situation. You know, there's no such thing as a fully digital forwarder, because they still have to pick up the freight and move it. So I think I quite agree with Stefan. I think it's just a reality that we are today. It's neither a threat nor an opportunity. It's something that's going on. And because it's a reality, we need to face that reality. But it's not black and white. That's perhaps the most important thing I want to say.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's really interesting. And yeah, I think if we look at our journey today in our discussion, we see that, and I hope our audience also noticed that what should have been a discussion very technical on digitization is really embracing all the diverse aspects of the business of freight forwarding. We talked about cultural shift. We talked about the learnings of the COVID. We talk about the young generation that needs to find also a leadership in an organization like Fiata to help them and help all the members to move forward to a new reality, to new markets, which needs and requires to rethink processes, to have probably, I think, and that was the last discussion we had today, was a more open mind, open to different business models, to new business models, because the world that we are going to experience in the year to come will change drastically. So I suggest that I go through the three of us for a last word. So let's start by Henk, because I I finished the first round with you, so Henk.
So perhaps just as a concluding remark, and it was a question that was raised, and I think it's really important for the audience here, which is how do you do this stuff, right? If we look at the progression in air freight, which is an area I know well, where we had paper airway bills, then we had e-airway bills, then we had cargo imp, then we had cargo XML, and now we have one record. And interestingly enough, those 4 or 5 different technologies, starting with paper, sort of indicate the process you have to go through. And sometimes I get the question, can we do one record? We haven't done anything yet. And I often say, it doesn't really matter where you start, but I would almost recommend you start with the basics. Unless you're capable of doing electronic business, then you're going to fail down the road anyway. So you need to start with the basics. Your operation has to know how to manage electronic information between you, within the office, before you start doing externally. So I think it's just a progression, and you don't start with the end thing. You're going to fail almost certainly. You're going to build it up. It's all about your confidence and competence with electronic business. Once you manage that, you can start adding in technology and the solutions, but you've got to start there. And so to anyone that hasn't started the journey yet, just start. Don't leave out the complexity. Do the easy stuff first and get experience. And work together with your national associations, work together with Fiata, because there's a lot of know-how there. I recommend that.
Thank you very much, Henk. Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, digitalization, it's an opportunity for collaboration. I think many forwarders have embraced the IATA bill, and you see that there are even more than airlines in some cases. You have regions of the world where airlines haven't done much, but freight forwarder have done the part of the job. And I think it's, but if you start with IATA bill for the air freight business, for example, it's an opportunity for you to talk to your suppliers, to discuss with your peers, and to really engage and revisit your process. I will never insist enough on this opportunity to re-engineer your processes. But last word is really, it's an opportunity for collaboration. This is what we need.
Thank you, Stefan. And for the end, the last word to Steve. Steve, what do you want to say to our members?
Well, thank you, Stefan. I would like to say to you, I thank you for the new direction for Fiata, from you and your staff, and I leave a message really for your Fiata conference. I think the past forwarders have handed the baton on, and I think we expect the present to protect the industry for future forwarders. And I don't think we've ever really had any great expectations of our associations. Yes, for their trading conditions and for help when we have issues, but for the best part, we've got on without them. Now we see, I believe, your key value. So please don't let the past down or pontificate with the present to lose the future. We look to you to have a more leading role, and I hope that this panel goes some way to helping you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. It was a great moment. It went very, very well, fast, and we even are 5 minutes late, but I hope our participants enjoyed the discussion as I enjoy it. And I'm really looking to work with all of you. And just for everyone, knows that Fiata is here to fulfill his role, and you need to reach out to us and come if you have questions, if you want to take part in it. Just contact Fiata, contact Lucelia, Guy, and the whole team at the Fiata headquarters, so that we can ensure a bright future for our activity and for the benefit of the supply chain. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.